Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
We're so excited this is coming together.
Yeah.
So tell me, how did this even happen? Because this is like your brainchild, baby. so as we're birthing
All of our brainchild. Okay, the funniest thing was I teach piano part-time in addition to my full-time job. So I was teaching this little girl, her name is Surabhi Arun, a little 7-year-old. She's 7 years old, and we were talking and everything, and she was like, Gauthami, you should be a talk show host because you and my mom always talk about crazy social things and this and that. And then she sits there and she's like meditating on this. And she's like, you know what? You should do a talk show and it should be called S.I.T. And I'm like, S.I.T? Well, what does that stand for? Social issue time. Oh, hello. And I was like, wow. So the wheels on my head started turning, and then I proposed it to Tildy. Tildy proposed it to you, and now we're here.
Yes.
And so when you heard the idea, what made you go, yes?
Well, first it was Gauthami. But I really love the concept when she pitched me the concept of, the topics that we would be talking about and the impact that potentially they could have for women, not only here in Dallas, but around the world, and things that we normally don't talk about because we're afraid to. So I thought, why not? Let's do it.
It provides a great forum for women of all ages from all different backgrounds and ethnicity to talk about the issues that they're going through without any sort of judgment.
Right,
you
right.
know?
And what I thought was so cool is the diversity.
Yeah.
I mean, that we've got a diversity of experiences, not just our backgrounds and ethnicities, but our experiences and the way that we've lived in the world. I think that will bring, something so different to what people already are exposed to.
think
I'm
so.
excited.
Yeah, and that was one of the great things about the pitch for me was I think all of us have such a range of ethnicity in our friends, and really to showcase what we have in common, not really focusing on what's different about us. So that was a big deal for us. I know when we initially talked.
And as women, we are supposed to lift each other up and empower each other and inspire each other. So this gives us a great platform to talk and come together and empower and impact the world.
Yeah. Right. And so let's get started with empowering and impacting the world. One of the things I wanted to talk about recently, we've seen a lot of publicity about the silence of women and people not having a voice. What does that really mean? When you hear someone say women don't have voices, what does that mean for you all?
Honestly, I think when we're talking about silencing, how do I put this? Meaning that you don't have a place in this world, therefore you shouldn't have to speak up. We are, as a woman, sometimes I feel like we're minimized and what we have to say is not important. We could be the strongest person in the world, we can have a voice, but if society doesn't allow us to speak, how can we speak? Because it's kind of ingrained in us like, well, you're a woman, you're not supposed to say this, so you got to keep it to yourself. So with that fear, with that stigma, it prevents us from talking and moving forward.
Yeah. And for me, it's about value, and whether you're here in the States or anywhere else, it's not knowing your value. And because somebody has either put you in a place where you don't know it and keeps you somewhere where your value isn't, really reinforced. Yeah. So to me, that's silence. That's silencing somebody. When you don't know your value, you're not likely to speak up because you don't know you have a right to.
Right.
And something that I always think about, we're looking at this day and time. I wonder how it was in the 50s, how it was in the early 20s. Was it just as bad as it is now, or is it bad now?
I think it's different because, during that time, you didn't have social media.
Yeah.
I mean, things are so instantaneous. Right. And I think women didn't, have that luxury of being able to get all this information and connect globally in the way that they, do now. But the difference then is I think women may have had more of these informal circles of connecting where you're doing knitting groups, and you're bringing your kids together. And I think because of time and all of us are so busy, women really don't have those spaces as much to figure out how to connect you know, and being at home during that time, I think as homemakers, you probably had more opportunities, whether you were at a church,
Right.
you know, there were opportunities for women to really get together and connect. So I think it's different, but I think the issue is probably the same thing of feeling isolated, that you're not valued by either being a homemaker, if you're in corporate America, not feeling valued. There's this term that's been real interesting that's come out about queen bee.
Okay.
And you know that women who do have voice, you know, if we don't talk, then we're bitchy.
Right.
What do you think about that concept of the queen bee syndrome?
There was an article last year, right, about that. It's like if you talk too much, then you're a bossy, and if you don't talk too much, then you're a pushover. So where do you find that balance?
Right.
Yeah, I remember that.
I mean, obviously, I don't agree with it. I think there's a time to talk, and I think there's a time to shut up.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
So you just have to know the difference between the two. And I think, you know, the queen bee is probably used as a negative connotation.
It is. I think so too.
But I embrace it. You know? And I think it's important for women to embrace it. If you do have something to say it.
Right. But it's very interesting that men can have that, and it's looked
Right.
at as assertive. And when women do it, oh, she's aggressive.
Yeah.
What's wrong with
Yeah.
her? You know?
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting to see that that's valued
Right.
for one gender, and for another, it's almost looked down upon for you to have voice.
Right. So I have a question on that, because that brings up, you know, the Sheryl Sandberg
Lean in.
lean in, and then her ban on bossy, using the word bossy. And for me, my take on it was, why would you ban it? Why not embrace it? You know,
That's good.
instead of being anti something, why not just embrace it and give it a different spin?
Yeah.
And
Right.
that it's not a bad thing
not.
to be bossy, you know?
And I think the key word that we're trying to look for is tact. When you talk and you speak up, use tact.
Yeah.
You can still be bossy and you can still be considered bitchy, but have tact
Yeah.
to it.
Well, and I think you do it in a way that doesn't demean other
Exactly,
people.
exactly.
I mean, and I think sometimes the connotation to that is it's demeaning to other people, and that's not always true. I think mean comes, you know, across in any gender, color, you name it. But I think women can be assertive, and I think leadership requires you to be situational. So there are times where you are gonna, you know, tell somebody, "Wait,
Right.
that's not working," and other times, you know, you're going to do it in a different way.
Yeah, I've been in situations where these women, amongst women, where they are so bossy, they have no filter whatsoever, and it just comes at you, and when you least expect it, and it's very offensive. So when you learn how to practice tact and be able to filter certain things you shouldn't be saying, then I think it's a healthy way, and it's okay to be bitchy or bossy.
But sometimes I wonder, when you were saying that, my mind was like, ding, ding, because I wonder if women do that because they think that's the expectation, that for me to be validated, I have to act a certain way instead of act out of who I really am.
Yeah.
And it goes back to being silenced, that it's this thing of, well, I can't be who I'm authentically created to be.
Right.
And so I have to pretend to be something else. You know, now if that's who you really are, that's one thing, but I see a lot of women who really aren't that way,
Right.
who sometimes feel that in leadership that I have to, you know, come across as.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting.
So
What
how
think?
do you make how do you distinguish the difference? You know, I mean, what's the fine? Because there is a fine line.
You're right. I agree.
I
You know,
agree.
so, and I think we all know that it's your communication style, and knowing how to communicate, or knowing the other person's communication style as well, as far as how they're going to be more receptive to what you have to say.
Right.
So what's the fine line? You know, where does bossy become bitchy?
I think when it demeans other people. I think when it comes to a place of being mean-spirited, where it's the intention. I think for everything that you do, I think it really boils down to what is the motivation and the intention. If the intention is really about doing something good that benefits people, then there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I think if the intention is, how do I push others down to make myself more important or feel more valuable, then that's the problem.
Yeah.
And also, like I was mentioning earlier in our conversation, when you don't have the ability to use tact, I think that's when it comes off also bitchy, you know? And this is something that I was wondering about earlier. Would being passive aggressive be considered bossy or bitchy? I wondered about that.
That's interesting.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because passive aggressive, just the term alone has a very negative connotation, but when you actually practice that in corporate America or in the workplace, I wonder, what do you guys think?
You know, I don't know how to even think. That's wild to even think about that, because it really is being aggressive in a way that's a little bit subversive and manipulative. Yeah. Now you got me going.
I know. I can't think of that in a positive light for some reason.
I mean, have you ever worked with anybody that's,
Girl, don't get me started. I don't want to say.
We're live.
I can't say. This is an old job,
I used to have a boss that would be that way, and you could never tell what she was thinking or what she was going to do next. Therefore, we would be like walking on eggshells. Oh my God, what's going to happen next?
Right.
What is she going to say to me? Oh my God, I'm going to be fired tomorrow. You just never know.
But it's strange because many women, when you ask a lot of women who they would like to work with, a lot of women prefer working with men because of those experiences.
Yes.
And I remember having a boss who would wait for me to see what time I was getting to work. And she would go in an office next door and listen to the conversations I was having with students.
Oh my gosh.
It was just so bizarre having someone do that. And I was much younger. So it really did shape the way that I saw women in leadership. And it made me really go inward. It was kind of like, if I say anything, I can't come against her because she's in a position of power.
Right.
So I got silenced in that situation where I felt like I don't have a voice. There's nothing I can do about it. And obviously it's approved because she's been able to do it for a million years.
Yeah.
So what did you do? I mean, what ended up happening?
I got a new job.
Which is what normally happens, right?
But you know what I learned from that experience? I read this book some years ago that blew my mind, where they were talking about when people leave jobs, one of the biggest mistakes that they make is not telling people the truth why they left. So many of us walk away from jobs with oppressive leadership and sometimes bosses who are, bossy. And we walk away and not tell the truth. And so I just said, I got something else to do. And secretly I'm telling my friends, that lady is nuts. So after reading that book, I started going, it's not fair to her or to me.
Right.
I'm not going to name who she is. But it's not fair because she didn't get an opportunity to change. Because I wasn't honest. I just walked away.
And what's so amazing is that, sometimes your boss could define whether or not you're going to remain in that position.
Yes.
And that's kind of scary because you just don't know what you're getting yourself into. And I've been in situations, or I've known friends to be in situations where they go interview with that particular boss. They're great during the interview. And then once day one comes, day two comes, it's a whole different ball game. And it's like, I should have probably declined that job. I don't want to be here anymore.
But I think it goes back to the issue of the authenticity. I think for a lot of people, they don't know their own voice. And so it's very hard to connect to other people and be honest about what your needs are. Sometimes people use leadership as a way to feel good about themselves.
Exactly.
And so if they don't have voice, how do you really expect people to be in positions to lead effectively?
I agree.
They can't. And whether that's in the home or in their community, they don't.
Well, and that's where you have the inauthentic voices come up too, because they take on roles that are not necessarily theirs, so they're role playing a lot of the times. Because
that's a book. Like inauthentic voices. What is it?
Role playing?
I like that. Say more.
We'll trademark it.
You guys hear that? You guys hear that? Okay, we're great. That's mine. Don't take it. I'm coming after you.
Copyright today.
But don't you think that's even more dangerous?
Yes.
For women to take on roles because they're mimicking somebody else instead of finding their own voice and their own authenticity, really. And I think in the times that we're in now, that is even more critical now, more so than ever, for women to step into their own power, their own voices, and to find out what it is, who they are. What is it that I want? What am I passionate about? All those things that are really important, but also to be cognizant if they are trying to role play.
Right.
Am I trying to be someone that I'm really not?
Sometimes I think doing that would definitely have an adverse effect. Maybe not today, but definitely maybe tomorrow or the next. So you have to be, like you said, very cognizant of what you're saying.
And there's nothing wrong, though, to, like, there's a TED Talk that a woman was, you know, the fake it till you make it syndrome, you know, which I believe to some extent, but I love what she says. She changed it from fake it till you make it to fake it till you become it.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's powerful.
It is.
That's very powerful.
It is. But it's about the thinking.
Yep.
And changing the way that you think and see yourself, and understanding the power that you may not have it now. The goal is to become it.
Yep.
That's really deep. So I want to ask you all a question. This week, it was really interesting because one of the Bill Cosby attackers, you know, it's like a gazillion that are coming out now. And it's like, wow, you know, there's more than the pudding pops that this man was involved with. And one of the ladies is her mother actually wrote a letter to his wife saying that, you know, you silenced my daughter.
Really?
Yes. And she was talking about the young woman is in her 40s now. She was a model.
Wow.
Beautiful young woman. And, you know, she talked about how this experience totally changed her life to where she, you know, didn't have great relationships. It impacted, you know, her whole outlook. And so in having that experience, she was silenced. What do you think about that? And everybody was coming out and these people who have been silenced for years who are now coming out and being forced to, I think, retreat again. What do you think about it?
I think it's about courage. You know, for example, if one person is silenced, they're going to remain silent for a while. But when you see others coming forth and having the courage with fear and going forward and talking about this, I think other individuals, other women are also encouraged to do the same thing. Hey, if she can do it, then so can I.
Yeah.
But people are saying, why'd they wait so long? Why didn't they come out and say anything?
There's different dynamics to everybody.
Yeah.
But you can't minimize it. Obviously, they're saying something because something did happen.
And how many people
How
have
many
come out?
people- yeah.
I know.
Like you said,
it's
mean, come on.
I mean, it's like
more
really?
than, like you said, the number of pudding pops he's putting in a commercial. Yeah, sometimes
Those sweaters
It's
really
like,
did something
you know,
that he was wearing.
you gotta build courage. You have
Yeah.
to have the courage, and sometimes courage takes a while to
does.
come. It's not instantaneous.
No.
You know, I went through a situation where I've had to face a year of violence, and it took me a long time to come forth and talk about it because, number one, that's not the environment that I grew up in. Culture played a huge part. What is that person going to think of me? So there's a lot of different factors that go into why people are silenced.
It's interesting that you say that because one lady came out recently as well, and she made the comment about culture. That she felt that as an African American woman, she was putting the culture at risk by saying anything bad about this icon. And it's very interesting how we don't pay attention to cultural dynamics, that in addition to gender plays a role sometimes in our silence.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's, to add something to that, there's a stigma of shame, you know, to any situation that where there's trauma involved, right, or abuse of some sort. So I think that's a lot of the reason why a lot of us don't talk about things, you know, or don't come out until years later because you haven't found your voice. You don't have that courage, you know. You're not willing to put that shame aside, you know. So I think shame has a hold on a lot of women.
I agree.
You know?
And also, it's like, you know, once you talk about it, once it's out in the open, that fear of, oh my gosh, what is she going to say? What is he going to say? What is that community going to do to me? You know, they might deport me. Who knows what's going to happen? So the repercussions of speaking out and speaking up, that's always there in your head.
But what gave you voice? I mean, what allowed you in that awful situation to say, I gotta have voice. I gotta say something.
I couldn't lose the trust of my parents. I had to speak up. I did not want them to suffer later, and I had to speak up.
Wow.
And it was hard. It was really, really hard. You know, I was going to college, you know, and it was not the fear of taking an exam. It was the fear of whether or not I'm going to live to take the exam.
Wow.
And, you know, when somebody feels and kind of brainwashes you and tells you, you're not going to speak because this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to do. So that fear of what's going to happen to you, that fear of the unknown keeps you shut, keeps you shut down.
So what did you do? Did you actually end up telling your parents what was happening?
Oh, it
or?
all came out little by little, little by little.
Wow.
So, and I'm glad I did, because I wouldn't be here today if I didn't.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that's the power of the story.
Mm-hmm.
I think that all of us have stories, and what keeps us from being silent is telling the story.
I agree.
And that, I think you even sharing that liberates other people to be free and share their story, because there's a bondage, I think, that happens when we don't do that.
Yeah. Well, I can't tell you how many times I've told my story, and I did it at Empowering Women as Leaders group, and every time I tell my story of abuse or a traumatic divorce, you know, women will come up to me and say, "Thank you for being my voice." And to me, that's both very empowering for me, but I hope that they then take that and find their own voice.
Right. Yes.
You know, because it does make a huge difference, and it does give people permission to start talking about, you know, those issues.
It gives people hope.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That, hey, you know what? She can do it.
Yep.
So can I. May not happen instantaneously, but that your voice will always be their inner voice. Like, wow, she spoke up. It's time for me to speak out too.
Yeah. Well, and for us, right, that have been through something like that, it does instill sort of a confidence that if I can do it, anybody can.
Right.
And you want to instill that confidence into other people.
Right.
You know, it's like, come on,
You can do it.
You can do it.
You can do it. I recently wrote an article about, you know, my experience of when I was in college. There was this pastor who was very well known, that one day I decided to go to his office. He told me come and meet with him, and I went, and it was the worst decision. Because I'm thinking I'm going to talk about, you know, me graduating from college, and here's this spiritual mentor, and it became a situation where I was really running around his office trying to get away from him. And I remember, you know, thinking, well, I didn't get raped, so I don't really need to say anything. And the few people who knew, and at that time I was dating my husband, and we even went to leadership and within the church, and they said, oh, he's done it before, we'll give him counseling again.
Wow.
And so this man, there was a lawsuit recently that came out about with all these women where he's done that. He's still preaching and doing his thing in this area. But I remember being so traumatized by that, and I really wouldn't tell people. I stopped going to church because I felt like, well, how is someone who's in that kind of leadership role allowed to do something? And my voice wasn't taken seriously. It was minimized. And it wasn't until recently that I saw this stuff that was coming out that I said, I got to say something. You know, and tell people, can you get through it? Yes. Does it change who you are and what your life looks like? Yes, but it can be for the best.
Right.
You know, and I was very fortunate to have a support system who pushed me to have a voice and who said, you can't stay in hiding, and that wasn't your fault. Because I remember thinking it was something I did. Maybe I wore, you know, this dress, or I looked a certain way, and maybe I created that, and it had nothing to do with me.
Right.
And that whole blaming the victim thing, I mean, seriously? I can't get over that. Always, it's the victim's fault. It's the victim's fault. She's the one that provoked this. She's the one that said this.
Yeah.
Or
she shouldn't have been
she
wearing
shouldn't have been wearing that. I mean, grow up.
And it has nothing to do with those things. I mean, she could walk in with a sackcloth.
Yeah.
You know, and if he is the person that he is to do that, he's going to do it regardless. And I think it is so wrong to put the onus and the responsibility on women, you know, when there are men who are out of line. And this guy was doing it to women who were underage. I mean, and nothing has been done.
And we have to change that mindset. If this is not right, how can whatever comes out of our mouth be right too?
Well, did you see that video of that woman who was groped on the airplane?
No.
The man reached through the seat and started groping her.
Are you
serious?
Yeah.
kidding me?
And he not only did it once, but he did it twice. It was somewhere out in Asia. I think it was a Pakistan man or an Indian man or something. Well, this woman did what nobody else would have done. She turned on her video on her phone and berated him for what he had done in front of everybody. Followed him out.
Wow.
You need to check out this video.
I'm sorry, I need a high five her right now. I need a high five. You go.
Let's go, girl.
You know? And then his whole take was like, hey, you know, take it easy. I mean, just
really?
yes, being nonchalant about the whole thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy.
It's like she minimized it. It's wrong. You
Yeah.
should not be doing that.
Yep.
Exactly. And that's the problem why I think a lot of people retreat is the feeling of being minimized. It's amazing that she used, what she had and took that to a place to make a difference and to stop him. And I hope that empowers other women to do the exact same thing.
And another thing another concept I was thinking about is, the whole saying, boys will be boys.
Yeah.
So when you hear that, of course it's going to keep you silent because they're excusing it.
Yeah.
Boys will be boys. I'm so sick of hearing that. Well, they're going to do what they're going to do. But yet, the female is going to be responsible for her actions.
Right. And the sad part is that the boys will be boys are mostly vocalized by women that I've heard.
The mothers?
The mothers.
But that's very interesting. When we have this conversation and we talk about it, do women participate
Absolutely.
in their own silencing?
Absolutely.
How so? What are other examples that you've seen that women have participated in the oppression and silencing of other women?
Just use Bill Cosby, for instance. How many women have come out on his behalf, despite the number of women that have come out, saying that they were abused or groped or anything like that. I mean, that to me is like, seriously, how can you say anything?
Right. When you have this many people that are saying something, and even if you question credibility, there are all these people who have nothing to gain. I mean, there's nothing at this point that I saw on one blog post, which I'm like, I got to start reading comments because they infuriate me. I'm sitting around like, and the comment was, they're out for money. You're talking about supermodels that are doing well and people that are already actresses and doing well. What do they gain from having their reputations destroyed and everything they've done questioned? What is it to gain?
I mean, I get the whole point. You're innocent until proven guilty. But when you have so many women coming forth, there's got to be some sort of viability there.
Well, I mean, there's a man who had receipts that worked with him that came out and said, I've got receipts for paying off people. He's like in his 90s. There were so many people in the industry who knew that this was what's going on. And it goes back to, how do we continue to protect people that silence others?
Exactly.
And I think that happens more often than not.
Earlier in the conversation we were talking about mothers, right? And in addition to the boys will be boys, well, I've heard this one before. My son is not capable of doing such things. He is a straight A student.
Wow.
He does his chores. He's a good boy. Oh, I could not imagine him even touching a woman.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that, I think, sometimes also because they're excusing the behavior. Accept responsibility for your behavior. I'll have more respect for you at the end of the day.
But does it go to this place of, we raise our daughters and nurture our sons? I've heard people use that comment that even in the rearing of our children, and you think about this ideal of silencing, that maybe what we do to our daughters and their rearing is very different, and how we treat them and oppress sometimes is so different than our sons, and we make excuses. What do you all think about that?
I don't have kids, but I do have nieces and nephews, and I think they, to a big extent, even watching my parents, I'm the oldest of four, have a baby brother who's 16 years younger than me, and there was a difference. They really nurtured him more so than they did us as female. So I absolutely agree with that. As far as in my own circumstances, I could totally see that.
That's a question I would have to our audience, like, why? Why does that happen? Mm-hmm. What's the difference? Yeah. Why can't we raise them the same way?
Mm-hmm.
No.
And value them both, because I think they all have something to say. I don't think we realize the damage that we cause to both. There's a film that recently came out, the lady who did misrepresentation, and she had the film, that first piece was about how media images impact young girls. Well, this next film, and I don't know what the title is, that recently came out, talked about how images impact boys. And I don't think we realize when we're doing that kind of cuddling and, excusing them, the impact that it has on the men that they become.
Right.
And I think there has to be an evaluation in parenting of how do we make sure we're raising healthy, contributing citizens who don't silence other people.
Right. But don't you think that's also cultural? because of the value that, different ethnicities put on male versus female.
Yeah.
I know in my family, we couldn't wait to have the boy. So I never felt devalued, but in thinking about it, it's like, well, why was it, the family lineage being kept going, and things like that. But in a lot of cultural societies, I think the value is put on the male. And there's not an equality, and there needs to be. And I think if anything, to have women or parents thinking about that and how they're treating their children and how to do it equally. So what do you think are some things, as a mother, what do you think are some things that parents could do to do that? I mean,
I have a wonderful girl, and that's all I have. And I am trying to raise this strong, bold, beautiful inside and out human being. I was raised with my cousin, who's a boy, and we were raised very much alike in our house. My grandparents did very differently. My grandmother thought he was God. So I remember for Christmas one year, she bought me a pair of socks. And she got him like this amazing warm-up suit. And how do you say to your grandmother, I've been wanting these socks forever.
What color were they?
Oh my God. I mean, they were like this dark brown. What was I going to wear it with?
The best gift ever.
But she thought that's all I needed. But he's amazing and he deserves all of this. And so my grandparents, especially my grandmother, treated him very differently. And that had some results in who he became.
Right.
I think as parents, it's really important to think about that. Curfew, prime example. Why is it that boys can stay out till 2 and 3 in the morning?
Because boys will be boys.
And a girl, she better be at home.
Exactly. In bed by 9 o'clock.
Because what did they say when I was growing up? Nothing's open that late but a pair of legs. It was something really I'm really serious. I used to hear that growing up, and it's like, so there's no reason for you to be out as a girl. It's like, huh? I'm like, who says it? Oh, I had a PE coach who told us in middle school, I'll never forget this. He says, you know how you stay from getting pregnant? And we were like, what? He goes, put an aspirin in between your knees and hold the aspirin. And then some little girl went, well, but I was like, that's enough. No more conversation. But that's
amazing
something.
the amount of double standards that are out there.
Yeah.
Only working girls, go after 9 o'clock. You need to be inside by 8. That's my mom.
Yeah, no, my mom's code was, Tildy, remember to keep your purse closed. As we were walking out the door, the purse was the purse.
It's got all that shame.
Yeah.
Let me share with you guys what my mom's message is. This is the saint she is. God is watching you. Don't do anything bad. God is watching. And I'm like,
were you constantly looking over your shoulder?
And one time my phone rang, and it was like at 11 o'clock, and it rang. My friend's like, who's that? I'm like, it's God. God is calling. I need to let her know.
I need that phone number.
She wants to know where I am, so let me answer God's phone call.
But it's so funny how we have those experiences where I remember one of my former students told me, her mom said, you're sitting on a gold mine. You should never be broke. I'm like, who tells their kids that? Who says that? But it's something how there is such a double standard in how we look at women and how we look at young men. So I know we're getting close to our time. And what I wanted to end with is, what would be your closing thoughts or action items that you would give women about having voice? If you could give advice, what would you say? Everybody's thinking.
Well, for me, and what helped me find my own voice was really finding out who I was and who I wanted to be. I was in a place in my 20s where I didn't know who I was. I didn't have a voice. I still had my past dictating my future with the years of abuse, sexual abuse I had suffered. So for me, it was making up my mind that I wasn't going to let that happen anymore. I wasn't going to let my past dictate my future anymore, and finding out who I wanted to become, and the impact that I wanted to have. I wanted to have a positive impact. So how could I do that? And I think that's probably the first step for people to find their own voices, What are the things holding you back?
That's good.
You know?
Yeah, I think mine's also very similar. What I realized was, I'm not going to let something or someone define who I am and prevent me from speaking out, because that's going to prevent somebody else from speaking out. So if I have the courage to have a voice, I'm also giving the other person a voice.
Yep.
And I think that's what's gotten me through.
I think it boils down to what you both said. It's about knowing your story. And I think it's embracing not just the good stuff, it's the bad and the ugly that I think we have to embrace, because it makes us who we are. Exactly. And all of that is so special. And I think it not only will liberate us, but it liberates other people when we are honest. So ladies, thank you for a wonderful time of conversation. I know we can keep going on. I know, I kept going, oh my God, I gotta shut up. I gotta shut up.
So we will be back.
Yes.
We will be back on March 25th. Is it 28? 28.
I just know I'm coming back.
Yeah, we'll be back. We'll be back, and we'll be talking about more and more issues that we need to speak up.
Yeah, and
speak
if you have any issues that you'd like for us to address, please write to us and let us know.
So thanks for joining SIT. I'm glad you had a chance to sit with us while we talked about social issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.